A snowstorm stranded a single father and his boss in the same hotel room. What happened behind that closed door no one could predict, and the aftermath changed everything they thought they knew about life, love, and second chances. Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where are you watching from. United States, Canada, Malaysia, UK, Australia, Jamaica. Snow fell in thick, lazy flakes outside the airport windows of Anchorage, Alaska, coating the tarmac in white silence. Inside, chaos roared. Flights blinked red on the departures board, canceled, delayed, canceled again. Wilson Anthony stood near gate 14, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, buddy, I'm stuck here another night," he told his 8-year-old son Ryan, whose small voice crackled through the speaker. "Is it snowing there too, Dad?" "More than ever, you'd love it, big flakes like marshmallows." Ryan laughed, a sound that warmed Wilson's chest even as exhaustion clawed at him. Since his wife, Marcia, had died from breast cancer 3 years earlier, laughter in their home had been rare, tender, fragile, and precious when it came. "I saved your seat at dinner," Ryan said. "Aunt Carla made chili, she said it's your favorite." Wilson smiled. "Tell her she wins, I owe her a big hug when I'm back." He hung up and glanced toward the gate counter where the airline clerk announced again that all flights were grounded. Groans filled the room. People scrambled for hotels, but Anchorage was small and a storm like this meant everything would fill fast. Behind him, a calm, clipped voice said, "Well, that complicates things." He turned. Nicole Tipton, his CEO, mid-40s, sharp navy coat, the kind of confidence that could freeze a boardroom faster than the Alaskan wind. Her gray eyes took in the chaos, then landed on him. "Mr. Anthony," she said, "any luck finding a hotel?" He shook his head. "Already checked the big ones, all booked solid." Nicole exhaled, the first crack in her usual poise. "Of course they are, I'll make some calls." She stepped aside, phone already to her ear, her tone slipping into that smooth command that made investors jump. Wilson watched her for a moment, the picture of control even in crisis, and wondered if she ever got tired of being perfect. 30 minutes later she returned, snow dusting her shoulders. "There's one room left at a place near the airport, small but clean." "Just one." She gave a wry smile. "Anchorage hospitality in winter, apparently." He hesitated. "If you take it, I can crash at the terminal, it's fine." "Mr. Anthony, we've been awake since 4 a.m. You need rest before tomorrow's meeting, if there is one. We'll share. There's a sofa, apparently." Wilson opened his mouth to protest, but she was already striding toward the exit. He followed, thinking of Ryan's bedtime question the week before. "Dad, do you ever get lonely?" He hadn't known how to answer. The cab wove through white streets toward the modest North Star Inn. Anchorage's lights glowed faintly behind the curtain of snow. The driver whistled low. "Heard they're closing the main highway soon, you two got lucky." Nicole, checking emails on her tablet, muttered, "Define lucky." Inside the inn, the receptionist looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "One room left," she said, handing over the keycard. "Queen bed, pull-out couch, heater works most of the time." Wilson took the card. "We'll make it work, thanks." As they entered the small room, the door groaned shut behind them. The heater hummed unevenly and the carpet gave off a faint scent of pine cleaner. Nicole surveyed the space, one bed neatly made, a narrow couch against the wall, a small window showing the swirling storm. "I'll take the couch," Wilson offered immediately. Nicole's brow lifted. "You don't even know if it's long enough." He pressed a hand to the cushion, the springs squeaked in protest. "Doesn't matter, I'm used to uncomfortable things." That last line hung in the air longer than he meant. Nicole didn't respond, but something softened in her expression, not pity exactly, more recognition. She set her briefcase down and said quietly, "I'll make coffee." While she fussed with the room's small machine, Wilson slipped into the bathroom to wash his face. The mirror reflected someone older than his 39 years, dark circles, tired eyes, a man still carrying the ghost of hospital hallways and chemotherapy wards. He'd watched Marcia fade, cell by cell, smile by smile, until there was nothing left but the promise he made her, raise him right, live when I can't. He splashed cold water on his face, exhaled, and returned. Nicole handed him a steaming paper cup. "It's awful, but it's hot." "Story of my week," he said, and she actually laughed, a quiet, surprised sound. They sat in silence for a few minutes, each pretending to focus on their screens. Outside, wind rattled the window. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. Nicole finally spoke. "You mentioned your son on the flight, Ryan, right?" He nodded. 8, smart enough to negotiate bedtime but not smart enough to win. "That's a good age," her voice softened. "You raise him alone." "My sister helps when she can. His mom passed away." "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "Cancer, wasn't it?" He looked up startled. "How did you?" "You kept the pink wristband on your keychain, I noticed." He touched the faded rubber band hanging from his car keys. "Yeah, breast cancer, 3 years." Nicole stared into her coffee. "My mother had it, she survived, but the fear never left." For a moment, the air in the room shifted, 2 lives overlapping through shared loss. The heater clicked off, the silence deep enough to hear the snow whisper against the glass. Wilson cleared his throat. "Tomorrow's presentation might get pushed." She nodded absently. "Maybe that's for the best, gives us time to breathe." It struck him then how tired she looked, not the surface fatigue of overwork, but the deep weariness of someone who's built walls so high even she can't see over them. He smiled gently. "You don't strike me as someone who breathes often." Nicole's lips curved. "Occupational hazard." They both laughed softly. The tension broke, replaced by something fragile but real. Later, as Nicole typed one last email and Wilson folded himself onto the too-short couch, the snow outside thickened into silence. In the dim light, Nicole glanced over once more. The man who saved her company millions was already asleep, one arm tucked behind his head, the lines of worry eased for the first time since she'd met him. She turned off the lamp. For reasons she couldn't name, the room felt warmer than it had when they arrived. "I poured my heart into this story because I believe real emotions still matter." My girlfriend laughed and said I'd never even reach 1,000 subscribers. She might be right, unless someone like you proves her wrong. Please hit subscribe, not for me alone, but for the stories that deserve to be heard. The blizzard quieted sometime before dawn. When Wilson Anthony woke, pale sunlight crept through the curtains, cutting across the hotel room in stripes. He stretched on the couch, his neck stiff from the lumpy cushions. For a moment he didn't know where he was, then the faint scent of coffee and the low hum of Nicole Tipton's voice brought everything back. Nicole was already dressed, crisp blouse, blazer, hair pulled back into that perfect bun that announced control. She was on a conference call, standing near the window. Her tone was steady, but her eyes flicked to the storm outside. "Reschedule Chicago," she said into her phone. "We'll handle it remotely. Yes, tell the board the delay doesn't change our strategy." She ended the call and noticed Wilson watching her. "Morning," she said. "You snore." He sat up, embarrassed. "Sorry, years of parenthood, you stop hearing yourself after a while." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that looked like it hadn't been used in years. "I made coffee, the good kind. I found real beans downstairs." Wilson took the mug she handed him. "You should run the hotel, you're better at fixing problems." "That's because I caused most of them," she replied. They shared a brief laugh, the kind that lingers longer than it should. After they checked out, the streets of Anchorage glistened under a new layer of snow. The world looked cleaner somehow, untouched. Nicole walked beside him, coat collar high, heels sinking slightly in the slush. "Ever notice how quiet the city gets after a storm?" she said. "Yeah," Wilson replied, like it's holding its breath. It wasn't a romantic comment, not exactly, but it carried the quiet understanding of two people who rarely had time to listen to silence. When they reached the office, most of the staff hadn't made it in yet. The building was half dark, humming only with the sound of heating vents. Nicole unlocked her glass office door. "You could take the day off," she said. "You've earned it." Wilson shook his head. "Ryan's with my sister until tonight. I just end up fixing code in my pajamas." "Then do it here," she said. "At least the coffee's better." He smiled, setting up at his desk. Hours passed quietly. The company's Anchorage branch looked out over the frozen bay and sunlight bounced off the snow like shards of glass. Around noon, Nicole appeared at Wilson's cubicle. "Lunch?" she asked. He blinked. "You eat lunch?" "I do, occasionally, mostly to prove to my staff I'm still human." They walked to a small cafe across the street. The place smelled like soup and cinnamon. Nicole ordered a sandwich, Wilson black coffee and clam chowder. As they sat, she asked, "How long have you been in Alaska?" 8 years, moved here when Ryan was born, thought a quieter city would help us reset. Did it? He hesitated, for a while, but grief, it follows you like a shadow. Nicole stirred her soup absent-mindedly. When my mother was sick, I used to sit in the hospital cafeteria pretending I was just there for coffee, like if I didn't go to her room, the news couldn't get worse. Wilson looked at her, then really looked. She made it through, right? She did, Nicole said softly. But I didn't, not really. You come out of that kind of fear changed. You build walls so you don't have to feel that helpless again. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, snow blew against the windows like restless ghosts. Wilson broke the silence. You ever get tired of the walls? All the time, she admitted, but they're what keep me standing. He smiled sadly. Maybe, but sometimes walls keep the good stuff out too. That afternoon, as they returned to the office, whispers began to ripple through the hallways. Two executives seen entering together. One hotel room. Anchorage isn't that big after all. By the time Wilson reached his desk, the rumor had already been reshaped twice. In one version, they'd had dinner together. In another, they'd been seen sharing wine at the hotel bar. Nicole noticed it too. Her assistant's glances lasted a fraction too long. When the last meeting ended, she called him into her office. The blinds were half closed, the winter light casting shadows across her desk. "Have you heard?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Yeah, people talk. This company feeds on gossip," she said bitterly. "You spend 10 years proving yourself and one rumor rewrites it all." Wilson folded his arms. "You don't owe them an explanation." "And you," she asked, "you've got a son, you think this won't reach him eventually?" He hadn't thought of that. The image of Ryan's innocent face hearing lies about his father knotted his stomach. "I can handle it," he said finally. "You've got more to lose." Her jaw tightened. "Don't tell me what I have to lose, Mr. Anthony." The formality in her tone cut through the warmth that had built between them since that night. The distance returned, the boss and the employee, the glass wall between worlds. Wilson nodded, understood. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "I didn't mean," she began, then stopped. I don't know how to fix this." He looked back at her. "Maybe it doesn't need fixing, maybe we just let the truth be what it is." She smiled sadly. "You really believe truth wins in offices like this?" "I have to," he said, "otherwise I wouldn't still be here." That evening, Wilson sat in his car outside his sister's house. The windows fogged from his breath as Ryan ran up to him, backpack bouncing. "Dad," the boy shouted, "Aunt Carla said the news said it's the biggest snow ever." Wilson smiled. They might be right. As he drove home through the white streets, Ryan hummed to himself in the backseat. The boy had Marcia's eyes, soft, hopeful, unguarded. "Dad," Ryan said suddenly, "do you like your boss?" Wilson almost missed the turn. "What makes you ask that?" "You talked about her twice this week. You never talk about people from work." Wilson chuckled. "She's different, she's strong, and kind when she forgets she doesn't have to be. Like Mom." The question hung heavy in the warm car. Wilson swallowed. "Maybe, but nobody's like Mom. Nicole's just Nicole." Ryan leaned back, satisfied with the answer. "She sounds nice." Wilson watched the road, the snow glinting under the headlights. "Yeah," he said softly, "she is." Outside, the storm had passed, but inside him something else was just beginning, a quiet stirring that felt both dangerous and alive. The following Monday, the office buzzed louder than usual. Winter sunlight poured through the glass walls, catching every sideways glance, every whisper that stopped mid-sentence when Wilson Anthony walked past. Rumors had a scent, sharp, cold, like the metallic tang of fear. Wilson could almost taste it. He kept his head down, pretending to focus on his monitor. But his inbox told a different story: 2 canceled meetings, 1 polite postponement, and silence from people who usually greeted him with easy smiles. Across the hallway, Nicole Tipton's door remained closed. That was new. By lunch, his phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. "Ms. Tipton requests to see you, 2 p.m. Formal, no warmth, no emoji." Wilson sighed, saved his code file, and walked the long corridor lined with framed company awards. Each plaque gleamed like it belonged to someone else's life. Inside her office, Nicole stood by the window, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the snow-covered bay outside. She didn't turn around when he entered. "Close the door," she said. He obeyed. "They're talking, aren't they?" she asked. "Yeah," he admitted, "a lot." Nicole exhaled through her nose, not anger exactly, more frustration wrapped in exhaustion. 16 years of building a reputation, she murmured, and one weather delay makes it sound like I trade favors for success. He studied her reflection in the glass. "You know it isn't true, I know it isn't true, the rest they'll get bored." She turned then, eyes sharper than usual. "And what about you, Wilson? You have a son, you really think this will just fade?" He didn't answer, because part of him feared she was right. 2 days later, the whispers evolved into headlines within the office chat threads, private jokes disguised as memes, sly comments in the cafeteria line. He overheard one intern say, "Guess sleeping your way up works both directions now." Wilson's fist tightened around his coffee cup until the cardboard crumpled. Nicole heard it too. By the afternoon, she'd ordered an emergency HR meeting. Her calm voice never rose, but everyone left the conference room pale. That should have made things better. It didn't. By trying to protect him, she only confirmed the gossip. That night, Anchorage glittered under clear skies for the first time in weeks. The snow reflected city lights like scattered stars. Wilson drove home with his hands clenched on the steering wheel, replaying every decision that led here. The late-night coffee. The quiet laughter. The way she'd looked at him in the morning light, not like a boss, but like someone seeing him for the first time. At home, Ryan ran up and hugged him. "You okay, Dad?" Wilson forced a smile. "Just tired, buddy." They built Lego towers until bedtime. But when Ryan finally fell asleep, Wilson sat alone on the couch, laptop open, resignation letter half-written on the screen. He didn't want to quit, not after 6 years of work, not after earning everything the hard way. But he couldn't stand being the punchline in rooms he'd fought to belong to. The next morning, Nicole found the letter in her inbox. She read it twice, then a third time, her coffee untouched. Every sentence was polite, professional, final. By noon, she called him in again. "Is this about the rumors?" she asked quietly. Wilson shook his head. "It's about peace. I can't give my son a life that teaches him dignity if I keep letting people rewrite who I am." Nicole sat down slowly, her usual confidence faltering. "You don't have to leave, I can fix this." "With respect, you can't," he said gently. "The more you defend me, the worse it looks." Her eyes glistened, though her tone stayed steady. "You think walking away will protect your reputation?" "No," he said, "but it'll protect my sanity." For a long moment, they sat in silence. The hum of the heater filled the space between them. Finally, Nicole whispered, "You're the only one here who looks me in the eye without wanting something." He smiled faintly. "That's because I already have what matters." "Ryan," she said. "Yeah," he nodded. "Ryan." She stood, then walked to the window again. Outside, snow began to fall, slow, hesitant flakes drifting like second thoughts. "If you ever start that tech idea you mentioned," she said without turning around, "let me know, I might invest." He chuckled. "You invest in me after all this?" She glanced back, a hint of warmth returning to her face. "Maybe I believe in redemption stories." That evening, Wilson cleared out his desk. A few coworkers mumbled goodbyes that sounded like guilt. He didn't hold it against them. People feared the spotlight more than lies. As he stepped outside, cold air hit his face like a baptism. For the first time in months, he breathed freely. At the parking lot, Nicole waited beside her car. He paused, unsure if she wanted to talk or simply share the silence. "You'll land on your feet," she said finally. "Hope so." "You will." He nodded, then smiled. "Take care, Miss Tipton." "Nicole," she corrected softly. He opened his car door, looked at her one last time, and said, "Good night, Nicole." Back home, Ryan met him at the door wearing superhero pajamas. "Dad, you're early." "Yeah, kiddo, guess we've got some new adventures coming." Ryan's eyes lit up. "Are you scared?" "A little." Mom said being brave means being scared but doing it anyway. Wilson's throat tightened. He pulled his son close. She was right. Later, after Ryan went to bed, Wilson stepped onto the porch. The night sky over Alaska shimmered vast, endless, clean. He thought about Nicole, about everything unsaid between them. Maybe one day when the noise faded, their paths would cross again. But for now, he had work to do, a son to raise, a life to rebuild from honest ground. He smiled at the stars, exhaling a cloud of warm breath into the frozen air. Here to starting over. And if you've ever started over, if you've ever had to walk away from something safe to protect something sacred, then maybe you understand Wilson tonight. If you do, don't just scroll past his story. Hit subscribe so more people find the courage to rebuild too. Snow had long melted by the time spring arrived in Anchorage. The streets glittered with puddles, the days stretched longer, and the air smelled faintly of thawing pine. 3 months had passed since Wilson Anthony walked away from his corporate desk and the whispers that came with it. Now his days began at 5 a.m. with coffee, code, and his son's laughter echoing from the kitchen. Ryan had just discovered pancakes. Not eating them, making them. "Dad, I flipped it," he shouted one morning. Wilson turned from his laptop, half amused. Did it land back in the pan this time? Ryan grinned, showing syrup on his chin. Mostly. It wasn't perfect, but neither was Wilson's new life, and maybe that was the point. His small apartment had become the headquarters of his startup, a one-man dream called Brightline Technologies. He was building a software tool for small Alaskan businesses to handle digital payments more easily. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. His idea, his code, his piece. Money was tight. Some days the power bill looked scarier than the empty client list. But Wilson slept easier now. There were no rumors, no politics, just him, his son, and possibility. Still, some nights when Ryan was asleep and the city lights flickered beyond the window, Wilson caught himself thinking about her. Nicole Tipton. The way her voice softened when she forgot to sound in control. The way she'd looked at him in that last moment, not as a CEO, but as a woman who didn't want to say goodbye. Across town, Nicole's world looked perfect again, at least on paper. The board had cleared her name, the gossip had died, buried under new scandals. But victory had never felt emptier. She sat in her corner office late one night, city lights stretching across the bay. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, immaculate, poised, lonely. Her assistant had left hours ago. Her phone buzzed once. A text from her sister, "Dinner this weekend, you always cancel." Nicole sighed, typing a quick reply, "I'll try." But she didn't mean it. She hadn't realized how much quieter her world had become without Wilson's steady presence. No one argued with her anymore. No one made her laugh in the middle of chaos. And no one looked at her like she was more than the title printed on her business card. 2 weeks later, fate intervened, as it often does when hearts leave unfinished work. Nicole was invited to speak at a small business conference downtown, a panel on entrepreneurship in Alaska. She almost declined. Then she saw the list of attendees. Brightline Technologies. Founder Wilson Anthony. Her heart tripped over its own rhythm. When the day arrived, she almost convinced herself it was coincidence, until she spotted him in the crowd. Same calm posture. Same thoughtful eyes. But something new in his expression, peace. He was taking notes, smiling occasionally at other founders' questions. A man rebuilding one line of code at a time. After the event, she caught up to him near the lobby, pretending it was casual. "Mr. Anthony," she said, voice light, "I thought you left the corporate world behind." He turned, surprised, then smiled. "Ms. Tipton, I see the corporate world hasn't left you." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You look happy." "Trying to be." "In Brightline." "Barely standing," he admitted, "but it's standing." They shared a long silence that wasn't awkward, just full. "Would you want to grab coffee?" she asked suddenly, to catch up. Wilson hesitated, coffee or closure. Nicole blinked, thrown off by his honesty, maybe both. They met the next afternoon at a small cafe overlooking Ship Creek. The snowmelt had turned the river wild, foaming and alive. Nicole arrived early, she'd almost turned back twice. When Wilson walked in wearing a simple navy sweater and that calm half-smile, she exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Still prefer black coffee?" she asked. He nodded, still hate it but yes. They talked about everything except that night. About his startup, about Ryan's newfound love for cooking, about how Nicole's company was shifting to smaller, more personal projects. At one point she said quietly, "You were right, you know." "About what?" "The walls, they keep the bad out but they keep the good out too." He smiled, "I'm glad you're letting some light in." She looked at him then, really looked, and it hit her how much he'd changed. He wasn't the quiet employee anymore. He was a man who'd rebuilt himself from ashes. They began meeting once a week after that, sometimes to talk business, sometimes to simply be. Ryan liked her immediately. "She's the first adult who beats me at Uno," he announced one Saturday when Nicole came over for dinner. Nicole laughed, ruffling his hair. "It's a gift." The three of them spent the evening cooking spaghetti and burning the garlic bread, laughter echoing through the apartment. For the first time in years, Nicole felt something she hadn't dared to name: belonging. Later, when Ryan fell asleep on the couch, she turned to Wilson. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked quietly. He met her gaze, steady and warm, every day, but not because of what happened, because of what it started. Nicole's eyes softened. "And what did it start?" He smiled. "This." Outside, the Alaskan sunset painted the sky in streaks of orange and violet. The world, once frozen, now glowed with warmth. Wilson poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one and said, "Funny how storms can trap you long enough to make you listen." Nicole nodded, her eyes glimmering, "And sometimes that's exactly what we need." They stood by the window, shoulder to shoulder, watching the world thaw. Spring rolled gently into early summer, and Anchorage for once felt alive. The air carried the scent of thawed earth, and the mountains glimmered under pale sun. Wilson Anthony's new office was tiny, barely bigger than his old cubicle, but it was his. Brightline Technologies had grown from an idea into something real: 3 clients, 1 part-time intern, and a laptop that overheated every other day. It wasn't much, but when he walked through that squeaky glass door each morning, coffee in hand and Ryan humming to himself beside the window, Wilson felt something he hadn't in years: peace. Nicole Tipton had become a quiet constant in their lives. Sometimes she'd stop by with takeout, claiming it was to support local businesses, though she only ever brought Ryan's favorite chicken nuggets. Other times she'd stay to help with invoices or brainstorm designs. What started as cautious friendship had turned into something steady and familiar, a rhythm. But Wilson still kept his heart guarded. Not because he didn't care. Because he cared too much. One evening the sky was bruised purple, clouds heavy with rain that hadn't yet fallen. Nicole sat at the edge of his desk, scrolling through a presentation he'd been preparing for investors. "This is good," she said, impressed. "Simple, clear, it feels honest." Wilson grinned. "That's because I can't afford a marketing department to lie for me." She chuckled softly. "I miss this. This. Talking without measuring every word." Wilson leaned back, folding his arms. "You could have always talked like this, Nicole." She met his eyes. "Not before." Silence settled between them, gentle and warm. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Nicole spoke again, her voice softer now. "You ever wonder why the universe forces people together the way it does?" "Every day," Wilson said. "I spent months asking why that storm happened, why it had to be you and me in that room. Maybe it wasn't an accident." She smiled faintly. "You think it was fate? I think it was timing." "Timing?" "Yeah, maybe the world waits until you're tired enough to listen." A knock interrupted them. Ryan poked his head into the room. "Dad, my science project's done," he announced. Wilson smiled. "Already, let's see." Ryan proudly held up a small paper volcano, taped together and filled with vinegar and red dye. Nicole gasped theatrically. "That's amazing, Ryan. Does it erupt?" "Only if Dad says yes," Ryan said, grinning. Wilson sighed. "All right, but outside this time." The 3 of them stood on the small balcony as Ryan poured in the baking soda. A fizz, a bubble, and suddenly, a foamy red eruption spilled over the edges. Ryan jumped with excitement. It worked. Nicole laughed, clapping her hands, future scientist clearly. Wilson watched her, the way her laughter filled the space, the way Ryan naturally leaned against her side, as if she'd been there all along. For a moment, it felt like the picture he'd tried to paint for years but never finished. Later that night, after Ryan went to bed, Nicole lingered by the door. Rain pattered lightly outside, soft and rhythmic. "I should go," she said, though neither moved. Wilson looked at her, searching her face. "Why do I feel like you don't want to?" She smiled faintly, "Because maybe I don't." He took a step closer, his voice low. "Nicole." She held up a hand. "No, let me say this first." Her eyes shimmered, not from tears but truth. "That night in the hotel, I thought I was just sharing a room with an employee, but you made me remember something I'd forgotten, that I'm still human, still capable of feeling something real." Wilson's breath caught. "I tried to forget it," she continued. "Tried to bury it under work, under logic, under fear, but every time I see you with Ryan, I can't help but think maybe the universe wasn't forcing us together, maybe it was giving me another chance." He smiled softly. "Another chance at what?" She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "At love." The words hung in the air like a confession and a promise all at once. For the first time, Wilson didn't hide behind reason or guilt or fear. He simply reached for her hand. "I'm not good at this," he said. "Neither am I," she replied. And then, just like that, two people who had lost so much found something that didn't feel like replacement. It felt like rebirth. They didn't rush it, they didn't label it. They just stood there, hand in hand, while the rain tapped gently against the window, as if the world outside was giving its quiet blessing. Weeks passed and their connection deepened. They went to Ryan's school play together, where Nicole accidentally cried at the sight of 8-year-olds dressed as planets. They spent weekends hiking trails that overlooked the bay, where Wilson teased her for wearing boots worth more than his car. And slowly, life began to look like something worth keeping again. One evening, while helping Ryan with homework, Nicole found herself smiling for no reason at all. Wilson noticed. "What's funny?" She shook her head. "Nothing, just I think this is what peace looks like." He smiled. "I think you're right." That night, after Ryan went to bed, Wilson stepped outside onto the porch. Nicole joined him, wrapping herself in a blanket. The northern lights shimmered faintly above them, streaks of green and blue curling across the Alaskan sky. He turned to her. "You ever think about how far we've come since that night?" She nodded. "Every day." "Do you regret it?" She met his gaze. "Not a single second." Wilson reached for her hand again, holding it gently. "Then maybe we stop calling it that night and start calling it the night everything began." Nicole smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Deal." The air was quiet except for the soft crackle of the distant storm. And for once, both of them knew they didn't need to fill the silence. They'd already said everything that mattered. If you've ever rebuilt yourself after heartbreak, if you've ever believed your best days were behind you, remember Wilson and Nicole. They didn't find love by chasing it, they found it by healing first. And if stories like this remind you that second chances still exist, then maybe you owe it to yourself to stay. So go ahead. Subscribe. Not for them. For you. Because your second chance might just be one storm away.